Okay, those of you who were present earlier would have heard me provide acknowledgement to country and also introduce the background to this particular proposal. There may well be some advantage if you read Damon's updated proposal on the co-location proposition. I'm going to probably want to expedite this meeting by not going through that background again in detail, except to say that we're extremely pleased that Damon and Margaret have been able to join us to provide us with their explanation and advocacy for the proposal. It represents a significant change in terms of how reference services will be provided for the State Records Office of WA and also for the Batty Library. This meeting was intended to take place as a face-to-face meeting, but obviously with the COVID-19 crisis, that's not possible. Two documents that you will ideally have on screen or be able to access, they are the agenda for this meeting and also Damon's updated proposal, where he answers a number of questions put to him in February about the project proposal. When we come to the open forum as part of this meeting, you may well choose not to ask questions that have already been asked and are represented in the project update proposal, in which Damon responds to questions from the ASA. There may well be questions that you do have that are not covered by Damon's response, and by all means in the open forum section, please feel free to ask them. You can use the chat box to signal to James Pooley, who's the General Manager of ASA, that you would like to ask a question, and James will keep a note and will call your name. We do have a large number of people expected to be part of this meeting, ideally James will manage the order in which people will be able to ask their questions. We do have some questions on notice which have been sent to me, and they'll be asked first. Just a little bit of background on the ASA and its role in advocating for State Records Office WA. Since 2017, the Society has been actively advocating for the independence and autonomy of State Records Office of Western Australia and for the development of what has yet to be delivered after many public inquiries and significant events in WA governance and constitutional history, namely a fit-for-purpose state archives and records service that we believe is required to manage and preserve not just our cultural history in government's records and data, but also the evidence of government deeds required to ensure that government is accountable for the citizens and community of WA. Those of you who have been around for a while will be aware that WA has a troubled history in under-resourcing this important function, and we are very keen to ensure that both from the perspective of cultural heritage and also from the perspective of the accountability of the WA government, that this situation. COVID-19 is not a reason to suspend civil society. We are going through a difficult period and it's impacting on everything that we do, including the activities of the State Library and State Records Office of Western Australia and government in general. And the attention of government is fairly fixed on COVID-19, and justifiably. But there will come a time when the crisis will end and we need to be prepared to stand up for our archives, museums, libraries and art galleries. This is likely to be more important than ever, since most Australian governments will be burdened with debt from COVID-19 and will be looking to make savings in various areas of government activity that they consider not to be high priority, some of which we do. So without further ado, I'd like to ask Damon initially to speak for 10 minutes on the co-location of reference services proposal. And Damon will be followed by Margaret, who will speak on that proposal also from a State Library perspective, also for around 10 minutes. That'll be followed by questions on notice that have been sent to me as a moderator. And after those questions on notice have been asked and responded to by our speakers, there'll be an open forum. So Damon, would you like to outline the proposal and the business case for it, please?
Sure, I can do that. Can you all hear me okay? Will someone let me know?
I'm hearing you fine.
All right, thanks. I will try and keep mine pretty brief. So between Margaret and I, we can probably do a pretty brief intro and then provide the most time for questions possible. I think we've sought to outline the approach in the letter I originally sent to the ASA and then the follow-up I sent more recently, and that really kind of sets out the key reason we approach this. I feel like I'm starting to become a bit more part of the furniture with the State Records Office here in WA. But I'm still learning, and it's been a fantastic experience, I have to say, to work with the team there and also with Margaret's team as well. So from early on, I sought to build a really good working relationship with the library, and Margaret's team has certainly reciprocated there. And I think, you know, this sort of opportunity comes out of building those kinds of relationships. So it's been pretty exciting to see that develop. Effectively, what we're seeking to do here is just provide a simpler way for people to access archival material that's held at the library building, and then ultimately more and more online as time goes on. It's really important to me, and I know
we seem to have lost Mark. Damien. It looks like he's still connected though, so hopefully he'll be back.
James, could you check to see his microphone's unmuted?
It is unmuted.
Okay. We seem to have lost Damien temporarily. Margaret, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, look, for some reason Damien's been lost to us for the moment. Would you like to make some comments as well while we're trying to re-establish our connection with him?
Sure. I guess what I was going to say was going to build and echo Damien's thoughts. So really, you know, this has come from us working together, from looking at the way in which our shared clients are, what their experience is between the two services, and acknowledging that we have a large number of shared clients. We also have a number that aren't shared, and that's understood as well. So the proposal is really around how can we consolidate and strengthen the services that we supply or provide to our shared clients. So that's the basis of the proposal. Of course, the other group that is in our building is the Aboriginal History Unit, part of the department, and they are also heavy users of both services. So it really stemmed from I guess a perspective of how best to serve our clients. So, but in doing so, and this is where Damien is best to comment, but the integrity of the State Records Office and its own service will be retained. So we are at this point, the proposal is simply to create a State Records service point on the third floor in the Batty Library, and to continue the services that are currently provided through the State Records Office through that service point. So they are, the proposal is about individual service points, not a combined service point, not a merging of staff. The two entities remain completely independent. It's a shared service space. So, and that's the first step that we're working towards.
Okay. Just, James, do we have Damien back online now?
We are working on getting him back.
Excuse me, Margaret.
Okay.
Okay. So, Margaret, would you like to add? Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So the part that will be shared will be the supervised reading room.
Yep.
And we are working through how that will work. And we're looking at issues including security, the resourcing, etc. But there'll be two separate service desks, but a shared reading room that the materials from both collections will be retrieved to and obviously supervised in that researcher's room.
Right. Okay, I think security is dealt with in the updated advice that Damien has provided, so I can direct people to have a look at that. I do have a question on notice that relates to the security issue. This is directed at Damien, but unfortunately he's not with us. So Margaret, you might want to comment on this. Quite clearly with the state records, we're dealing in some instances with records which have some confidentiality and access restrictions. So potentially there are issues of significant sensitivity. We've also had instances in the past where records have disappeared in the provision of reference services through untoward activity on the part of readers. So this is a key concern for members of the ASA, many of whom have professional experience and background in the kinds of things that have happened in the past. Is there any sense in which there will be an upgrading of security as part of this initiative, which will provide enhanced security for state archives as well as the records of the Batty Library?
Well, we're aware of security concerns and the need to ensure security. We are adding a staff-controlled lock to the Cohen reading room to facilitate people coming in and out. That's not currently present in the State Library, in the way it's currently configured. So that is an addition. Of course, there's the normal camera setup that we already operate in that room, which is recorded and monitored. So there is already some security provisions in that room, and certainly the intention is to ensure that the security needs are as robust, or we can meet the security needs as robustly as possible.
The next question I have, Margaret, on notice, some people submitted questions to me in email, and unfortunately they can't be with us tonight to ask these questions, is really about context. This particular respondent begins, that is a member of the ASA, by saying that while she personally sees nothing wrong with a single reference service, as long as materials are safe, secure and away from copiers, but she nonetheless feels that she wants to know about the context of this. And in this context, it's important to know the broader planning, whether there are plans to, for example, charge for retrievals or access to records, which is something that she feels very strongly ought not to happen. And there are some other questions as well, but let's deal firstly with the issue of whether in fact people are going to be charged for access to records. Can you indicate what the thinking is there?
Not that I'm aware of. Look, the service, and I think the questioner used, did you say integrated reference service? Is that, Mark, is that?
I think, yeah, she refers to a single reference service, which is a bit different from what's been outlined, yes.
Correct. It's not actually a single reference service. So it's very much about taking what's currently offered and transplanting it up to the third floor to the Batty. So the way in which the service will be provided, the cost structure, etc., is not intended to be changed.
Another query that came in, Margaret, as a question on notice concerns the bigger picture in which this decision is seen as a micro decision. This particular respondent's concerned about what that bigger picture might be. Is this, for example, the beginning of a merger between the State Records Office and the State Library of Western Australia? In Parliament on the 19th of September 2017, she says, Minister Templeman, when asked about the relationship of the State Records Office and the State Library of Western Australia, insisted that, and she quotes, "I need to highlight that there is no change to the Act and no change to the function and independence of the office and its role." And then she asks the question, Margaret, is this still the case? Is the Director of State Records Office reporting to the Office of State Librarian? Can you comment on those issues?
Well, there is no change. I can confirm there's no change to the Act. As far as I'm aware, there's no intention to change the Act. The Director of the State Records Office doesn't report to the Office of the State Librarian. They report, as has been the case for many years, to the Director General of, it was initially the Department of Culture and Arts, and then currently the Department of Local Government, Sport and Cultural Industries. What it is a relationship of working together where it's sensible and makes sense for the WA community, but we still retain our own legislative responsibilities, our own management and responsibilities over our staff and our operations. So none of that has changed. It's about how better to serve the Western Australian community.
The next question is also about... Damon, you're back. Sorry, we lost you there for a little while.
I have to say a huge thank you to Margaret for building those questions for me too. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay. Look, we've just been going through some of the questions on notice. I'll just continue with them, actually, Damien, and provide you with an opportunity to speak for a few more minutes since you've been away from the meeting.
No problem.
This question is also concerning governance and the co-location proposal. Under the co-location proposal and shared services model, so you might want to have an issue with that terminology, but this is what the questioner has asked. How is expert representation ensured for the State Records Office at the governance level?
Okay, so I just want to make it really crystal clear to people that we're not actually talking about integrated service delivery here. We are really quite simply picking up our existing location and service as it is and delivering that from the Batty Library space. So when people walk into that space, there will be a SRO desk there, there'll be a library desk, and of course there's the Genealogical Society there, the same space there. So that will look and feel, much the same as it does now. So the State Records Office staff will continue to deal with those inquiries and handle the appropriate material. We'll still be doing the retrievals and overseeing that service. We're just doing it from the Batty Library instead of the separate search room that we have at the moment. I hope that answers the question.
Okay, thanks for that. We've just got 2 more questions on notice. I'll aim to go through them as quickly as I can. The next one's about funding and resourcing. In fact, there are a couple of sub-questions here as well. And in this particular question, our respondent asks, how is funding for the core State Records Office functions, such as the support offered by the State Records Office for the new records retention requirements for non-government schools as of 1 January 2020, affected by funds diverted to shared services with other organisations such as the State Library?
Yeah, so I really want to try and avoid that confusion about shared services. It's a shared space, not a shared service. So there's no funds being diverted to shared services or being diverted from our current budget. But making this change is part of using our budget more wisely, I think. There's certainly opportunity to share some equipment. We currently duplicate that in the 2 separate spaces, and I think there's opportunities to do other things together in that space into the future. In fact, Margaret and I were meeting with our staff from both areas today to work through a number of opportunities in that space. So there are some great possibilities in what we can do with that space collectively. So any money we save in doing that, we can do other things. Or in the archives, for example, I'd love to put more investment into the preservation work that we've started to do this year. So I look forward to being able to, free some of our resourcing up to do those other really important things.
Right. Another sub-question. What plans exist for the current reference service area of SROWA that will be vacated with the relocation? Is SRO going to retain control over these spaces?
Well, there's no plan for that particular space at the moment. That's something that Margaret and I continue to work together in terms of the best use of that space in the building, and we're both also involved in the Cultural Centre Task Force as well. So that's looking at the broader space around the building as well. But there are no current plans for that particular space. The office itself remains where it is. But I'd have to say one of the silver linings of the current situation is that my team's been able to work more remotely, and that includes being able to work more closely with some other agencies in cases. So I look forward to doing more of that in the future. So that, particularly on the information management side, we're working alongside information managers more often, rather than being away from them in a single building somewhere.
The next question, Damien, I think is probably best answered by you in the first instance. Margaret may have a reflection as well. This is on mission and motivation. This respondent suggests that there may be some reputational consequence for the State Records Office if it doesn't maintain the perception of its independence and autonomy by virtue of this initiative, in the sense that government agencies expect the State Records Office to manage records which are confidential and for which access restrictions often exist. The mission of a library is essentially quite different. The mission of a library is to maximise the opportunity to access information resources, and SROWA manages access within the constraints of access restrictions on records. So this writer makes the point that there could be a reputational consequence for seeming to not have a separate identity from the State Library. Have you considered this as part of planning for this initiative?
Yeah, sure. I think ultimately this is part of making sure that identity is actually stronger, and that's the point I've made pretty strongly in that written response I've provided back. I probably won't really add to that. It's worth people just reading that because it sets it out pretty clearly. I think there's a great opportunity to give a greater profile to the work of the State Records Office, not less.
Okay, well those are all the questions that I have on notice, so I'd like to ask Margaret and Damien to make a closing statement in relation to their presentations, please. Margaret, would you like to begin?
Yeah, I guess in summary, it's about how better to serve the community, utilising the resources that we have between us to strengthen that, not to undermine the role of either organisation. We do recognise that they are different legislatively, they are different, and that difference will remain. But we are working together on a range of things, and you will have seen, for example, some great social media and promotion of collections and stories that we've been working together on. So it's about working together where it makes sense and where there's benefit to the community.
Okay, thank you for that, Margaret. Damien?
Yeah, look, I don't have a whole lot more to add to that. Thanks, Margaret, for calling out the work we've been doing on social media. I think that, you know, it's been really nice to see some of those stories from the archives getting out, and we've used the strength of that, of the library's communications team and their presence on Facebook to help get that story to a wider audience, which has been great. And I might also add just a cheeky promotion for our new LinkedIn page, which we've launched kind of quietly, but we'll be making some more noise about that soon. So if you're on LinkedIn, the SRO has a new page for that, and I invite you to come and join us on that. We'll be sharing news about this project and other work that we're doing through that LinkedIn presence as well. So look, I guess in summary, part of working a little bit smarter in terms of how we use the building, the resources together. You know, we'll learn a bit from each other as well, which is also good. You know, really looking forward to the staff working more closely alongside each other. But we understand, as Margaret said, that there are different, you know, slightly different systems there, and you know, it's important that people understand there's a separate identity, and that will be continued into the future.
Okay, thank you both for that. We appreciate that you've made time to share your perspectives and position on this development with the Society. I'd now like to open up the matter for general discussion. You can indicate your interest in asking a question using the chat box. Do we have any questions, James?
We don't have any questions yet. So if you'd like to ask one, you'll get in quickly.
Could you please unmute your microphone if you'd like to ask a question?
I've got a question.
Yes,
Joanna.
Go ahead, Joanna.
Oh, hi. Look, I just want to preface this by saying that I'm probably one of a very few people here tonight who cut their teeth actually working on a shared reference desk in the 1990s. And while we've heard you know, there's been a very strong sense that everybody wants to keep all these different service points on the third floor of the State Library. It's going to start looking like a badly designed department store if we're not careful. So I just thought I'd ask the question that nobody's dared ask, which is, what's wrong with a shared integrated reference desk? What you would then do is actually put all the complexities behind the scenes to have staff rosters that deal with the fact that staff work in different ways. different offices work in different ways, and this is what happened in the 1990s. But I mean, I go into the library and I'm pointed between A and B. I'm run between the genealogists and the state reference library desk, and if I walk in and there's a third desk there, I think if you're really wanting to think about service delivery, I think you have to think about an integrated shared service desk. Everybody can shoot me, but that's my view.
It's Damien here, Joanna. Thanks for that. That's a really good point, and one I should have made earlier. The setup that we reopen the library with will be version 1 of this service. It's our hope that we can, learn from that customer experience and working together and try and make that experience more seamless for people. I think there's really good potential to work together, but more closely. But we're going to learn as we go. So we're very much thinking that we do version 1 and then we get some customer feedback and we continue to refine that over time. It's a really good point about the last thing you want is for people to have to kind of run all over the place, even within one space. So if we can work towards that, that's ideal. But we're going to take a staged and steady approach to that. Great question, thank you. Margaret, did you want to add anything to it?
No, I think you've covered it, Damien.
So now you jump in.
Hello, this is Tom here. You there?
Hi, Tom. Hi,
Yeah.
Tom. Go ahead.
Right. I would like to know, well, to start with, I've, like Joanna, I was working in the Batty Library / State Archives in the 1980s when it was rather chaotic actually, and you had to think on your feet in order to deal with the diverse queries. Fortunately, in mid-1991, the SRO managed to obtain its own search room on the mezzanine floor above the 3rd floor level. And in April 1999, exactly 21 years ago, the SRO opened its current search room on the ground floor, and I personally believe that it's worked quite well actually since then. But I accept that these changes are going to happen, so I'm not really, I guess, becoming, querulous about this. I am concerned though about the independent profile of the SRO and hope that its website will remain, its web portal will have the same profile that it does at the moment actually.
It's physical access.
I'm also concerned about the level of invigilation that may or may not occur on the 3rd floor actually, because at the moment there's bags can be brought into the State Library up to the 3rd floor. I realise they can't be brought into the current private archive search room, but a whole rethinking will have to go on with respect to security and also training of staff there. Anyway, thank you.
Quite a few points raised there, Damien and Margaret.
Happy to tackle those, and I might try and attempt to do that in kind of reverse order if that's okay.
I think that would be good.
Yeah, I think Margaret talked before about security, so I don't want to kind of rehash that too much. But, compared to the current search room, the security in the new space will actually be enhanced. We've got some extra features if you include the CCTV and other features that are already in the library. And as Margaret said, we're going to add that extra lock on the reading room door to make that equivalent to what we've got downstairs in the current SRO room. So, that's an enhancement. In terms of, I think, going then back through Tom's questions, the next one was around the web side of things. That is an interesting one, and I guess today, as compared to in the past, there are lots of different ways to have a presence online, if you like. A web page is one way to do it, but one problem that you do see, particularly across government, is the plethora of websites. There's a lot of them. So my team is doing some work to join the agencies on wa.gov.au, and I know that's something the state government is really keen to pursue, is that you can go to one place and get some answers to questions. So we're definitely, we will be adding content to that. I think that's just another way to help people find information. And I mentioned before that we're kicking off that new LinkedIn page. That's another way to reach professionals. I think that's a really good channel to reach professionals rather than on a web page. And then, of course, there's Facebook, which is a great way to get to community, the community, another community, and tell stories. And the library's certainly been making great use of that channel, and we've joined them in doing that. So we're thinking about all of those online channels for getting information to people in the way that they like to get it. There's lots of choices there rather than just a website. And then finally, I guess in terms of working together, look, I've had the benefit of some of the SRO staff have been with the team for a long time, and they've got all that experience and that knowledge that they brought with them from that experience in the past. So we're very mindful of those kind of lessons we've learned from that time, and that's why we're taking that kind of steady stepped approach to what we're doing in the new space. Initially, it looks a lot like what we're doing, except we're doing it from the Batty Library, and then we'll see if we can tweak that to make it a little bit more streamlined over time. But we're certainly not going to rush into other major changes there without some customer feedback. So hopefully those have kind of addressed the key points that Tom made. Again, Margaret, is there anything that you'd like to add to that?
I think you've covered most of it. I know Tom was concerned about bags. The bag situation in the supervised reading room in the Cohen room is quite different to the rest of the building. So I think that I don't have any particular concerns. I think that can be managed adequately.
Thanks for that, Margaret. Look, a couple of questions have come in through the chat feed. I don't know whether you can both see them. The first one I'll briefly read out. Will state records be part or contribute to the Digitisation Centre for the WA ARC grant project that State Library WA is part of? Damien?
Yeah, that's a really good one. That is something that we'd like to be part of. It's pretty early days there, so I've got some work to do to kind of join the club, if you like. There are some great advantages in doing that, and those sorts of arrangements are generally open to other members joining it. So I think there are some advantages. Again, we're kind of looking at what the library's doing there and some of the early involvement. So yeah, we plan to get on board with that.
Further question, is the State Records Office concerned about an increase in the public perception that it is, quote, an historical collection and not an independent keeper of more recent government records?
I'm not sure that's a universal bit of feedback, but I can understand that might be a perception. That is why it's so important for us to to be building the bridges we are with Office of Digital Government and the parts of government that are creating those that information, the archives of today. And I think there's no better time to look at that than right now in this historic kind of moment. So I can't change that perception overnight, but that is something that we we plan to do through the work of our strategic plan. And I think I've talked to ASO members before about that, and I think that's something I'd love to come back perhaps to another meeting and talk everyone through that if I can get online in a different way. But that kind of sets out how we might start to get a better awareness of the information that we're creating today as being equally important as what's been created in the past.
It's a reality, is it not, that the larger part of the archive of the people of Western Australia is actually controlled by government agencies rather than the State Records Office? Would you agree?
It's definitely distributed across agencies. I think when we did the math, there was there might be something like 16% in the collection in the building at the moment. The rest of it is across agencies. So a huge part of what the team's doing at the moment is looking at ways that we can bridge across those agencies. We can't suddenly put all those things in one place, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to, we might be able to use technology in a different way to be able to discover and then access that information appropriately. So work like the work we've been doing around the redress scheme, for example, is really good at calling that opportunity out. And that's something we've been working again with the Office of Digital Government and even with the likes of Department of Finance, for example, to look at those opportunities. I think there's some great opportunities over just the next couple of years to be able to connect those systems together so we can actually more easily find and access those archives from wherever they are at the moment, and then consolidate those, in a smart way over time with the best facilities available.
Okay, thank you for that. Are there any more questions?
Yes, we have a question from Joanna.
Thanks, Joanna. Over to you.
Okay, look, Damien, you mentioned storage, and it's something that I did want to raise. Given that the State Library and the State Records Office are moving into a sort of more lovable relationship, I was wondering what plans, Margaret, you have for bringing more, releasing more storage that is in the building for the storage of unique state records. People probably are aware that it's one of the very few multi-level buildings in the metropolitan area that has the floor engineering for the sort of storage of the records. And at the moment, there's Damon will tell me how many kilometres there are of government records in private storage that's costing the government an enormous amount of money. So Margaret, I'd like to know from you what your plans are to bring or release some of the storage that is on the first and second floors where collections have been discarded over the years, core stack reference collections and things like that. Can you talk to us or give us some reassurance that the State Records Office is going to get some of that storage?
Okay, we're certainly, from a library perspective, continually reviewing our storage needs. We have our own needs for additional storage, particularly in the private archives area. That is the area that's growing the most for us, with quite significant growth, and our, sort of projections are that it's also going to grow. Can I just say, Damien and I, it is a current topic of conversation around what might be future opportunities, and I'd like to sort of leave it at that, but it's certainly a topic of conversation that we talk about quite regularly, and Damien might like to add, but it is something, the needs of needs for storage across government is certainly understood. So we are exploring what the opportunities might be.
Yeah, I can certainly add to that. Margaret and I have had some great conversations about this over the last couple of months, and that's an active area that we're looking at. So, again, it's about how we make the best use of the space available in the building and the types of different spaces in the building. I think our interest is in having, the really special, unique, significant material available in the cultural centre there. There's a great opportunity to do that. So, a bit of consolidation and looking at what we do there. There's a whole lot of other material that is equally important as archival material, but there might be a little more flexibility in terms of how we, how we store that, and different types of facilities required for it. If you think about the huge range of media and types of archives we're talking about. So we need to look at the best spaces for each of that type of material. I did want to make a comment about the commercial facilities for a moment, because I'd hate to see people kind of dismiss those. I think there's actually great potential to use them as part of the mix. So I think ultimately what we're going to see is, hopefully, is some consolidation in the best facilities, both government and the commercially run facilities. I would make the point that with commercial facilities, and I've had some experience directly in this before I joined the State Records Office, in a lot of cases there is a bit of co-investment that happens from the commercial sector, so they are willing to invest themselves and then have an ongoing investment in the technology to support digital first delivery. And that can be a little bit harder sometimes from within a government organisation. So, for example, in the State Records Office, there are things that we want to spend our time on. It'd be great to be able to leverage commercial providers for some services, particularly that digital on-demand service. So I think it's an important part of the mix, and that's something that we're certainly looking at. But I think there is great opportunity, not just at the library, but elsewhere across the public sector, to consolidate and do better with the space and the sort of facilities we've got, which is what I'm working with Department of Finance and others on at the moment. There's some great opportunities there. Hello.
Hello. Whoops.
Yes.
Sorry.
We have a question.
Oh, sorry. Have I jumped in on someone else? Oh, it's Isabel here, Isabel Smith. I'm sharing a participation with Tom Reynolds because I wasn't able to log on today as I had expected to do. But thank you for accepting me in the meeting. At least I hope I'm accepted. Can you hear me, Mark?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, Isabel.
Great. Thank you for that. I firstly wanted to congratulate Damon and Margaret both for taking the time to participate in this forum, because it is really, really so important, and it's exceptionally valuable to know both of your views. And I sincerely appreciate the matters that you spoke about, Damien, in terms of furthering the conservation work being done on archival material. And I think that is just so incredibly important. And I also wanted to ask whether, in relation, and look, I'm not opposed to this whole process or situation, but I just want to be clear about the SRO desk in the Batty Library, which sounds fine, and I applaud that. You've got a separate delineation, because they are clearly separate, quite separate collections, and they have separate legislative requirements placed on both of them. And so I applaud you for recognising that and putting an SRO desk in to that space within the Batty Library. I would like to ask, is there also a secure reading room for those purposes, which will allow the SRO clients to come up and view the items that they wish to? And in addition to that, are there arrangements being made for those particular items that the State Records Office has had for such a long time of not exactly counselling, but perhaps speaking with clients who've had or who have asked for very sensitive material that might be incredibly disturbing to them? And I wonder whether there are separate spaces for those people to view that material, and also to be counselled, for want of a better word, counselled in relation to that material. And I'm talking about criminal offences of ancestors that they may not have been prepared for, and various things of that nature. I'm sorry, do you want me to stop now? And I have another question, but I'm happy to stop now.
Isabel, yeah, I can address those two, and happy to address any others you've got. So, all right. So now I'm just going back. So the question you just finished with, in terms of a kind of private space, that's an interesting one, and in fact it's something we've been talking to the Aboriginal history guys about as well, and they are part of the discussion we're having about future stages of the work we do in the Batty Library area. I'd have to say it does give us some flexibility being in that space with access to other spaces around it, so that is something we're kind of looking at. in the first instance, we're going to use the existing reading room that's off the Batty Library. So there's the Leah Jung Cohen room there. That's well set up. It can accommodate the same numbers we have in the, or more, than we have in the current search room for the SRO. And of course, we'll have SRO staff, you know, available to supervise people accordingly and appropriately. So that's, you know, there won't be such a change there. I think they're the two key questions you had, Isabel. Was there a third you'd like to add?
Thank you, Damon. That is helpful. And it seems like you've considered all of the appropriate mechanisms that are necessary for people accessing very, very personal information. So thank you for that. The other question that I had probably relate to Margaret's initial address. And Margaret, I just wanted to follow up, and I'm not sure whether I misunderstood what you had said initially, but you did state, well, as far as I understood, you did state that this whole process was the first step towards working together in relation to joining or co-joining with the SRO. Now, does that mean that there are other plans to incorporate the State Records Office into the State Library?
Hi, Isabel. No, I didn't say that. I don't think that I said, well, I certainly didn't intend to say, if that's the way that it came across, that there was any intention that this was a first step to join the two offices together, because there are no plans, there's no intention to do that. What I was trying to reflect was also what Damien said, was that this is where we're starting the service, and we will from there work out how that might evolve in response to community need and what makes sense. But to reiterate, the two offices are staying separate. We have our own legislative responsibility, we have different reporting structures and different governance structures. So it's really about, we're starting with this completely separate and independent services, although in the same space. It may be that in time there is logic to some cross-skilling or other ways of actually providing service, but there's no intention to join the offices.
Okay, thank you so much, Margaret. I appreciate that. And just finally, I also thought I heard you mention a cost structure for reference services. So is that something that is in the planning for the future? Because currently, under the legislation, the state archives are freely available to the public. So I'm just wondering whether there is a move perhaps towards the future to making money from these incredible resources that are available.
That's the question I should answer now. We're talking about the state archives. There is certainly no plan to add new costs or charges for that. What I'd love to do is make digitisation more accessible. We just do a cost recovery on that one at the moment, but I'd love to make that easier. Ultimately, what we're interested in doing is trying to attract people to that digital first delivery, and that's also makes it more equitable for anyone in the state to access the archives. And we want to try and minimise, obviously, the handling of the original material. So, the more attractive we can make that online option, the better. But that's our focus. I don't have any other plans to change fees and charges.
Okay, thank you so much, Damien. That makes perfect sense. Thank you. And thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Isabel. We've got 15 minutes remaining, and we can possibly take one further question, after which we'll wind up, if that's okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
I did have one more, Mark. I'm so sorry.
Go ahead, Isabel.
I wondered about because Tom talked earlier about the website, and I had really wondered about the the physical building itself and how the State Records Office or the State Archive would be identified within the building or outside the building, so that there is adequate branding to identify this incredible resource that is available. It would be terrible to simply accept that everything was available in the Batty Library, because it is not a Batty Library collection. It is a State Records Office or a State Archive collection, and they are two very different collections. The State Archives is government material considered so valuable that it should be kept forever, and therefore available to the public under, you know, the certain restrictions granted by the legislation. So I just wondered whether, you know, the building name would change, or whether there would be appropriate signage within the building to acknowledge that the State Records Office or the State Archive is now placed in a very different position.
Just before Margaret and Damien respond to this question, I might mention that this has been raised in a number of comments received that haven't been the subject of specific questions. This is the issue of branding and visibility, and harks back to that reputational issue that I mentioned earlier in at least one of the questions that was asked on notice. So, Margaret, would you like to start with this?
I'm very happy to make a comment if I can, just quickly, that I feel I've addressed that quite specifically in the written feedback I've provided. There's very specific comments in there about the branding sort of thing. I don't have a lot to add to that, but I'd direct people to have a good read of that if they could. Sorry, Margaret, you may want to make some other comments.
No, I was going to refer to the written responses because I think it addresses it quite well.
Okay, thank you everybody. It's been wonderful to host this webinar. Apologies once more for the technical difficulties. Those difficulties related to the fact that we really have been quite overwhelmed with the response. We had something like about 60 to 65 registrations for this event, and unfortunately we hit a barrier with the number of participants that were included in our license. So apologies for that. The recording of the webinar will be made available on the ASA site subsequently, and Damien, you mentioned something that you were doing with LinkedIn as well that we might also promote to our members. So if you could send me that link, that would be really great. Just in terms of the engagement that we've seen tonight, it's been, as I said, quite overwhelming. We have 60 to 65 people that registered an interest. Unfortunately, not all of them could participate. By way of a parting statement that I think Julia would have made, we're living through a difficult time at the moment. We have an issue, a crisis issue, which has very much attracted the attention on government and also resulted in record indebtedness of government. And as we emerge from this crisis situation and return to a situation of greater normality, I hope that you'll maintain your engagement and continue to support our advocacy efforts, not just in the context of the State Records Office, but for galleries, libraries, archives and museums more generally, because those areas may well be having to foot the bill for the rather large deficit that governments will be running as a consequence of the COVID crisis. So please maintain your passion, faith and engagement. This, I think, has been quite a success, notwithstanding the technical issues, but please aim to provide us with the feedback, and if you think that the session has been worthwhile, then it could be that we can invite Damien and perhaps Margaret back at some later point to discuss the work that's being done. And certainly this conversation, this webinar has raised a number of issues in my mind that it certainly would be great to have a further presentation from Damien on. So thank you very much for joining us, and thanks particularly to Damien and Margaret for their excellent presentations of the co-location proposal. Thank you very much, and good night to all.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.